The sun was already burning over the horizon when the buses arrived at the Navy training base. The air smelled like dust, sweat, and ocean salt carried from miles away. It was the first day of Joint Special Training, a program that brought together the toughest Navy SEALs and a few selected intelligence officers for one brutal course. Everyone knew it wasn't going to be easy. Dozens of trainees stepped off the bus, boots hitting the ground in rhythm, their faces sharp and focused. They were used to challenge, used to pain, used to proving themselves over and over again. Most of them were men, tall, muscular, and proud, wearing the confident smirk of people who thought they'd seen it all. Then she stepped down. Lieutenant Sarah Donovan, short brown hair tied back, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, and a quiet, unreadable face. She looked calm, almost too calm for a place like this. She didn't flex or puff her chest out like the others. She just adjusted her backpack and walked straight toward the group. The other trainees noticed her immediately. A few raised eyebrows. Some whispered to each other. Having a woman in a SEAL-level training program was rare, not impossible, but still unusual. To them, it felt out of place. Chief Petty Officer Blake Harris noticed her too. He was one of the senior SEALs in charge of leading the exercises. He was tall, built like a tank with a buzz cut and a confident grin that always seemed one word away from arrogance. Blake had been on multiple missions overseas, and he carried his experience like a medal on his chest. When he saw Sarah, his grin widened. "Did someone send us a fitness coach?" he muttered just loud enough for a few nearby recruits to hear. They chuckled, and Sarah's presence suddenly became the focus of quiet amusement. The commanding officer, Captain Reeves, blew his whistle and called everyone to attention. His voice echoed across the training yard. "Listen up. This program isn't for the weak, the slow, or the proud. It's for those who can work as a unit. You may come from different branches, but here, you're one team. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the group shouted. Sarah stood straight, her expression still calm. She didn't flinch when the captain's sharp eyes passed over her. She'd been through harder things than stares or whispers. She knew the best way to earn respect wasn't to argue, it was to perform. The rest of the morning was all about assessment. They had to run through basic endurance drills, push-ups, sprints, pull-ups, planks, all under the blistering sun. Most of the men pushed themselves to show off their strength. Some grunted loudly. Others threw glances toward Sarah, almost daring her to keep up. But Sarah didn't just keep up. She outlasted them quietly. Her movements were controlled and smooth. No wasted energy, no noise. She didn't look tired. Every time the instructor shouted, 10 more seconds, she just nodded and kept moving. Some of the men, even Blake, began to notice that her timing was precise, almost machine-like. But still, no one said a word of respect. Not yet. During lunch, everyone gathered in the mess tent. The conversation was loud. Stories about missions, jokes about drills, and teasing laughter. Blake sat at the center, cracking jokes like he owned the place. When Sarah walked in with her tray, the noise dipped slightly. She sat down alone, her eyes focused on her food, ignoring the curious looks. Blake smirked. "You know, this isn't a summer fitness camp," he said loud enough for the table to hear. "You sure you're in the right place, Lieutenant?" A few trainees chuckled. Sarah didn't look up. "Pretty sure," she said simply, her tone calm but firm. Blake leaned back. "We'll see after tomorrow's drills. Don't worry, I'll go easy on you." That got more laughter. Sarah didn't react. She finished her meal, stood up, and quietly left the tent. Her silence bothered him more than any comeback could have. That night, as the camp lights flickered across the training field, Sarah sat by her bunk, reading the manual for the next day's obstacle course. She memorized every distance, every target, every requirement. She'd done this kind of training before, just never here. Never in front of people who already decided she couldn't handle it. In her locker, tucked behind her folded uniform, was a small metal tag engraved with her call sign, Viper 1. Few knew what it meant. Even fewer knew what she'd done to earn it. As she lay back on her bunk, she could hear the laughter of the men outside, Blake's voice loudest among them. But she didn't mind. Let them laugh, she thought. Tomorrow they'd see. The next morning, as the sun rose again, Captain Reeves gathered everyone on the field. "Today," he announced, "we start the combat endurance test. No excuses, no limits. If you drop out, you go home." The group cheered in determination. Sarah adjusted her gloves and stepped into line beside Blake. He glanced at her and smirked again. Hope you brought your running shoes, Viper, he joked, not knowing how close he was to the truth. Sarah smiled just slightly. Don't worry, she said quietly. I won't need them. Blake laughed, shaking his head. He still didn't realize what was coming, that the quiet, calm woman beside him wasn't just another trainee. She was something far more dangerous, and soon everyone would know her name. The next morning, the base looked different. The early fog rolled across the training ground, wrapping everything in a cold white haze. The smell of wet earth and salt water mixed in the air. The sound of boots echoed as the trainees lined up again, tired but ready. Blake Harris stood near the front, stretching his arms like a showman before a fight. His confidence was unshaken, his grin wide as ever. Around him, a few of the younger recruits laughed at his jokes. They looked up to him. He was the kind of SEAL everyone had heard stories about. Big missions, daring rescues, scars to prove it. Sarah Donovan took her place at the far end of the line, silent as always. Her uniform was spotless, her movements sharp. She didn't try to talk to anyone. She didn't need to. She was here for one thing, to finish the program no matter who doubted her. When Captain Reeves stepped out of the command tent, everyone snapped to attention. Today's exercise, he said, is team movement and coordination. You'll run in groups of 4 through the field course. Stay together, move fast, complete every checkpoint. Blake looked around at his teammates, then pointed at Sarah. Mind if she joins my group, sir? I could use someone to carry the water. Laughter broke out. Even Captain Reeves shot him a sharp glance but said nothing. Sarah didn't blink. She just stepped forward, her voice calm. I'll join, she said. If that's all right, sir, the captain nodded. Fine. Harris, Donovan, you're together. As soon as the whistle blew, the group sprinted toward the first obstacle, a line of tall wooden walls coated in mud. The others climbed quickly, pulling themselves up with loud grunts. Sarah reached the wall and leapt without hesitation. Her boots hit the top in one motion, her arms steady. She landed smoothly on the other side. Blake looked over his shoulder, surprised. He hadn't expected her to keep up so easily. They ran through trenches, crawled under barbed wire, and carried heavy packs over long stretches of gravel. Sarah didn't complain once. Her breathing stayed even, her face calm. Every time someone slowed down, she was the one quietly helping, offering a hand, steadying their balance, moving forward. But Blake wasn't done testing her. At the next checkpoint, they reached a shallow swamp. The mud sucked at their boots as they waded through it. Blake smirked and said, "Ladies first," making a grand gesture toward the murky water. Sarah looked straight at him and said softly, "Sure thing." Then she stepped in and crossed the swamp faster than anyone else. The rest of the team stared as she climbed up the far bank, covered in mud but smiling slightly. When Blake finally caught up, he was breathing harder than he wanted to admit. "You sure you're not hiding a motor under that uniform?" He joked, trying to laugh it off. She shrugged. "Just training, Chief." By the time they reached the shooting range, the other teams were still struggling behind. The task was simple. Hit 5 moving targets in under a minute. Blake went first, his shots fast and loud. He hit 4 out of 5, missing the last one by an inch. He turned around proudly. "Beat that," he said. Sarah stepped up quietly, took a deep breath, and fired. 5 shots, clean and steady. Ping, 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 ping. Every target dropped. No wasted bullets. No hesitation. The silence that followed was louder than the gunfire. Even the instructor raised his eyebrows. Blake's jaw tightened. As they walked to the next station, he muttered under his breath, "Not bad for a rookie." Sarah looked at him calmly. "Not bad for a SEAL either." That made a few nearby recruits chuckle quietly. For the first time, Blake didn't have a comeback. After the exercise, everyone gathered back at the field. Captain Reeves read the times aloud. Top performing team, Harris, Donovan, Pearson, Lee. Blake blinked. He wasn't used to hearing another name tied to his success. Sarah just nodded politely. When the captain dismissed them, the group began to relax. Blake, still trying to hold his pride, called out across the yard, "Hey, Donovan." She turned. "You got lucky today," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Tomorrow we'll see if you can really keep up when things get tough." Sarah met his eyes without fear. "Luck has nothing to do with it," she said. "But I'll be there." Her tone wasn't angry or proud, just matter of fact. That confidence unsettled him more than he cared to admit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the camp buzzed with quiet talk. Some of the men began to wonder who Lieutenant Donovan really was. No one could read her, not her past, not her rank, not the way she carried herself. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just ready. Blake lay awake that night staring at the ceiling of his bunk. He replayed the day in his head. The shooting range, the swamp, the way she moved like she'd done it all before. Something didn't add up. Who was she? He thought. Outside, the night air was cool and still. Sarah stood near the training field looking up at the stars, her hands resting behind her back. Somewhere deep inside, she knew tomorrow would be harder. Not because of the drills, but because of the pride of the man who couldn't yet see who she really was. Soon enough, the truth would come out, and when it did, no one at that base would ever forget the name Viper 1. The next day began before sunrise. The sky was painted in shades of gray and orange, and a thin mist hovered over the training field. The sound of waves crashing against the distant cliffs mixed with the metallic clang of equipment being set up. The camp was awake, restless, alert, ready for another round of punishment. Sarah Donovan was already up long before the others. She moved through her routine with calm precision, lacing her boots, folding her sheets, and checking her gear twice. She worked in silence, the same silence that followed her everywhere. There was something steady about her, something that didn't need words to be strong. Outside, Blake Harris was talking loudly as usual. "Another day, another chance to prove why we're the best," he said to his teammates, laughing. He looked around the yard and spotted Sarah doing stretches near the edge of the field. He smirked. "Our special guest looks ready for yoga again." Some of the recruits chuckled. But this time, not everyone joined in. A few of them had seen how Sarah performed yesterday, how she'd moved through the course without fear, how she'd hit every target with perfect accuracy. Something about her quiet confidence had started to make them curious. The morning briefing began. Captain Reeves stood before the group, his face serious. "Today," he announced, "we're focusing on tactical planning and field movement. You'll be divided into small squads. Your task, navigate through the forest zone, avoid detection, and reach the extraction point before time runs out." The challenge wasn't just physical. It tested strategy, teamwork, and mental focus. Blake grinned. "Sounds fun," he said, cracking his knuckles. When the teams were assigned, Sarah found herself with Blake again. The captain wanted experienced fighters mixed with the best thinkers. Blake wasn't thrilled. "You sure about this pairing, sir?" he asked. Reeves didn't even look up. "Positive. You might learn something." The comment drew a few quiet smiles. Blake's pride took a small hit, but he shrugged it off. "Fine. Let's move out," he said. The forest was thick and wet, the ground uneven and covered in roots. The air smelled of pine and rain. The mission was to move silently, mark checkpoints, and avoid being spotted by instructors acting as enemy scouts. Blake charged ahead, confident as ever. Sarah followed a few steps behind, scanning the surroundings carefully. Her eyes moved constantly, left, right, up, down, like she was reading a language only she understood. After an hour of trekking, they reached a stream. Blake waved for the group to move forward, but Sarah spoke softly for the first time. "Wait, 2 o'clock movement," Blake frowned. "I don't see anything." "Because you're not supposed to," she replied calmly. Just then, a signal flare burst from the trees. They'd been spotted. Blake cursed. "How the hell?" Sarah moved quickly, leading them behind cover. "They're using low ground to track us," she explained. "Next time, move against the wind." Her tone wasn't arrogant, just factual. Blake looked at her differently for a moment, but his pride wouldn't let him admit she was right. "Lucky guess," he muttered. As the hours passed, the team slowly began to follow her lead without realizing it. When Sarah said stop, they stopped. When she whispered wait, they waited. And each time, her instincts saved them from being caught again. By late afternoon, they reached the extraction point ahead of schedule. Captain Reeves was already there, arms crossed, stopwatch in hand. "Fastest team yet," he said, impressed. Blake grinned. "Told you I could do it," but Reeves shook his head slightly. "She led your route, didn't she?" he asked. Blake hesitated. His grin faded. He didn't answer. Sarah said nothing. She didn't need to. She simply nodded respectfully to the captain and walked away. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, the trainees gathered in the mess tent for dinner. The air buzzed with quiet talk about the day's mission, the points scored, the teams that failed. Blake sat at the table surrounded by a few friends, but his usual jokes felt forced. He kept thinking about the forest, how she'd noticed things before anyone else, how she'd moved like she'd been trained for far more than this. Across the room, Sarah sat alone again, eating slowly, reading from a small notebook she carried everywhere. It wasn't a journal. It was filled with tactical notes, mission sketches, and coordinates. A few people glanced her way, curious but too hesitant to ask questions. Finally, one of the younger recruits, a quiet guy named Pierce, walked up to her table. "Hey," he said nervously. "How'd you spot that scout in the woods today?" "I didn't see anything." Sarah looked up and smiled faintly. "You just learned to listen differently," she said. "The forest talks if you pay attention." Pierce nodded, unsure what to say next. "You've done this before, haven't you?" She gave a small smile but didn't answer. "Good night, Pierce," she said softly and went back to her notes. When she left the tent, the room felt strangely quiet. Everyone watched her walk out, calm, straight-backed, unbothered. Blake followed her with his eyes. For the first time, he wasn't annoyed. He was curious. There was something about her silence that unsettled him. Not weakness, but strength. A kind of strength that didn't need noise or recognition. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his fingers against the table. "There's more to her," he muttered under his breath. And he was right. Sarah Donovan wasn't just another officer trying to prove herself. She was a legend walking among them, and none of them had realized it yet. But soon they would. Because tomorrow, Blake Harris would push her too far, and that's when Viper 1 would finally strike. The sun rose over the training base with a fiery glow that seemed to set the whole camp ablaze. Today was different. There was tension in the air, a kind of electric energy that made even the seasoned SEALs pause. Everyone knew that today's challenge wasn't just about skill. It was about pride, reputation, and proving who truly belonged. Lieutenant Sarah Donovan arrived at the field early, as usual. She moved with quiet precision, adjusting her gloves, checking her gear, and scanning the terrain. Every step she took was measured, calm, deliberate. She didn't speak to anyone, didn't flash a smile. She didn't need to. She had a mission in mind: finish the course, earn respect, and remain true to herself. Meanwhile, Blake Harris was already at the starting line, surrounded by his usual entourage. He grinned like a man ready to conquer the world, cracking jokes to draw attention to himself. His chest puffed out, his confidence radiated across the field. To him, the drills were an opportunity to shine, and to remind everyone why he was considered one of the best. As the teams gathered, Captain Reeves stepped forward, his face serious. "Today," he announced, "is the Endurance and Precision Challenge. You will run the full obstacle course, carry weighted packs, hit every target, and complete it faster than anyone else. Failure is not an option." Blake's eyes flicked to Sarah. "Looks like luck won't save you today," he said loudly, smirking. "Hope you're ready to get left behind." Sarah didn't respond. She simply nodded, her eyes scanning the course. She knew that actions would speak louder than words. The whistle blew, echoing across the base, and the team surged forward. Blake led his group with confidence, sprinting ahead, shouting instructions and urging his teammates to keep pace. Behind him, Sarah moved like a shadow, quiet, controlled, and observant. Every obstacle she approached was calculated, every movement precise. The first wall came up, a massive, muddy structure designed to test upper body strength and stamina. Blake threw himself over it with brute force, grunting loudly. Sarah approached it differently. She measured the distance, gripped the edges, and propelled herself over in one smooth motion. She landed silently on the other side, barely leaving a mark in the mud. A few trainees paused to watch her, impressed, but no one spoke. The course continued with trenches, rope climbs, and crawling under barbed wire. Blake was loud, aggressive, almost theatrical in his effort. Sarah was calm, focused, methodical. Where he struggled with balance, she found the perfect footing. Where he wasted energy shouting and pushing, she conserved every ounce of strength. By the time they reached the water obstacle, Blake was breathing heavily. He had underestimated the course, and he had underestimated her. Sarah dove in with ease, gliding through the cold water, her movements smooth and efficient. When she emerged, she looked fresh, unshaken, and ready for more. Blake, on the other hand, was coughing, sputtering, and struggling to keep pace. The shooting range came next, a test of precision under pressure. Targets moved rapidly and accuracy was key. Blake fired quickly, hitting most of them, but one slipped past. Sarah stepped forward quietly. She didn't rush. She didn't fumble. One by one, every shot found its mark. Ping, 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 the targets fell, clean and precise. A hush fell over the spectators. Even Blake's smirk faltered. When they reached the final stretch, a long run up a steep hill carrying heavy packs, Blake's confidence had vanished. Sarah, still calm, surged forward effortlessly, her body moving with energy and control that seemed impossible after such a grueling course. She crossed the finish line first, not with a roar, but with quiet, undeniable authority. Blake arrived moments later, panting and stunned. The laughter, the jokes, the arrogance, all of it evaporated. He tried to hide it, tried to laugh it off, but inside he knew something had changed. This woman, who had silently followed him through the course, had just outperformed him in every possible way. The commanding officer, Captain Reeves, walked up, clipboard in hand. He looked at Sarah and then at Blake, his expression unreadable. "Lieutenant Donovan," he said. "Impressive performance. You've set a new standard." Blake's jaw tightened. "She got lucky," he muttered under his breath. Sarah only nodded politely. "Luck has nothing to do with it, sir," she replied calmly. Her tone carried no arrogance, just quiet truth. As the team regrouped, Blake tried to mask his frustration with jokes and loud commentary, but it didn't have the same effect anymore. The other trainees, who had laughed at her the day before, now looked at her with awe, whispers spreading through the camp like wildfire. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Sarah cleaned her gear alone, her movements deliberate and calm. She didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. The message had been sent without words. Her skill, her focus, and her quiet determination spoke louder than any boast. Blake, however, couldn't stop replaying the events in his mind. He had underestimated her, and now he couldn't ignore it. There was a storm of pride and curiosity brewing inside him, the kind he hadn't felt in years. Somewhere deep down he realized this wasn't just another trainee. This was someone extraordinary, someone who would challenge everything he thought he knew. And tomorrow, he would find out just how extraordinary Viper One really was. The morning air was sharp, almost biting as the trainees lined up for the next drill. The previous day had set a new tension across the camp. Whispers traveled like wildfire, and eyes that once ignored Sarah Donovan now followed her every move. Even the instructors seemed to pause for a moment when she passed. But Sarah didn't notice. She never did. She focused on the task at hand. Blake Harris, however, couldn't stop noticing. His smirk was gone. Gone was the confidence that had carried him through years of missions and battles. Now it was replaced with a flicker of doubt, and that doubt gnawed at him. "Today," he muttered to himself, "we'll see what you're really made of, Viper." Captain Reeves blew the whistle, signaling the start of the full-course endurance and precision drill. This was no ordinary exercise. It combined everything they had learned: running, climbing, crawling, shooting, and carrying heavy loads across treacherous terrain. Every second counted, and failure wasn't an option. Blake surged forward, pushing his pack higher on his back, charging ahead with the same brute force he had relied on all his career. Behind him, Sarah moved with quiet confidence. She didn't race blindly, didn't waste energy. Her eyes scanned the course, mapping every obstacle, measuring every distance. Every step she took was calculated, efficient, powerful, unstoppable. The first obstacle was a towering wall slick with mud and rain. Blake grabbed the rope and swung over with a grunt, pulling himself to the top with sheer strength. Sarah stepped forward, her movements precise and fluid. She didn't struggle. She leapt, grabbed the top, and hoisted herself over as though gravity had no effect on her at all. She landed gracefully on the other side, her boots barely leaving a mark in the mud. Blake shot a glance back. For the first time, he hesitated. She was keeping up. She wasn't just keeping up, she was ahead in skill, in control, in focus. Next came the rope climb over the water pit. Blake powered up with raw force, splashing into the pool below. Sarah moved differently. She wrapped her hands around the rope, using her legs in perfect rhythm, and ascended silently. She reached the top without a single slip. By the time they reached the shooting station, the course had already claimed the stamina of most trainees. Blake's arms shook slightly as he raised his rifle. He fired quickly, hitting 4 of 5 targets. One target just out of reach didn't fall. He cursed under his breath. Sarah approached the line with calm determination. Her breathing was even. Her stance perfect. She aimed, adjusted for distance, and fired. Every shot hit the moving targets. 5 out of 5 without hesitation. The instructor blew his whistle in astonishment. Blake's jaw tightened. He hadn't seen anyone hit every shot like that, not even during advanced SEAL exercises. The final stretch was a steep incline with weighted packs strapped to their backs. The hill was slick with rain, treacherous and designed to test endurance to the absolute limit. Blake powered up with everything he had left. Muscles straining, sweat and mud mixing on his skin. Sarah followed, but her movement was effortless. Step by step she climbed, her posture perfect, her focus unwavering. Her pack didn't drag her down. Her breaths were steady. She reached the top first, not with a roar, not with a shout, not with anything that demanded attention, just by moving faster, smarter, better than anyone else on that field. The other trainees stopped to watch. Even seasoned SEALs couldn't help but stare. And Blake stood frozen, chest heaving, mud dripping from his arms. He had never been beaten like this, not by a man, not by anyone he respected. And yet there she was, calm, collected, victorious. Captain Reeves stepped forward, looking at the course and then at Sarah. "Lieutenant Donovan," he said, voice firm but filled with respect. "You've set the standard today. Fastest completion, perfect shooting, flawless execution, outstanding." Sarah nodded politely. She didn't boast, didn't raise her arms in victory. Her eyes met Blake's for a brief moment, steady, unshaken, almost piercing. It was a look that said, "Respect is earned. Strength is shown, not told." Blake's pride twisted inside him. He tried to speak, tried to brush it off, but the words stuck in his throat. This wasn't luck, this wasn't a coincidence. She was simply better. As the teams regrouped, the whispers began. Trainees who had mocked her before now exchanged glances, nodding subtly, acknowledging her skill. The rumor spread. The quiet woman who had entered the base unnoticed was not just competent, she was extraordinary. That evening, Sarah cleaned her gear alone, under the dim glow of the bunk lights. Blake watched from across the room, a mix of frustration and awe brewing inside him. He finally understood something he hadn't admitted before. She wasn't just any officer. She was someone who had been forged in fire, someone whose reputation, Viper One, carried weight that went far beyond these training grounds. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, carrying the distant sounds of the ocean. Tomorrow would bring more drills, more challenges, more testing. But today had already changed the game. The trainees had seen something they wouldn't forget. Blake had seen it. And the world of the base would never be the same because now they all knew that Sarah Donovan was not to be underestimated. Not now, not ever. And the legend of Viper One was only beginning. The training ground was unusually quiet that morning. The usual clatter of boots, shouts, and laughter had been replaced with a tense, almost electric silence. Word of Sarah Donovan's performance yesterday had spread like wildfire. Every trainee, every instructor, and even the SEALs whispered about the calm, precise officer who had outperformed them all. Blake Harris walked through the camp, boots crunching on the gravel, feeling a strange mixture of pride and frustration. He was a seasoned SEAL, confident, skilled, experienced. Yet for the first time, someone had walked in and completely upended everything he thought he knew about skill, discipline, and strength. The teams gathered at the command tent, waiting for the next exercise, a simulated combat scenario designed to push everyone to their limits. Captain Reeves stepped forward, clipboard in hand. His gaze swept the group before settling briefly on Sarah. "Lieutenant Donovan," he said, voice calm but firm, "report your call sign for the exercise." The trainees glanced around. Everyone had a call sign, a code name they used during exercises and missions. Some were funny, some were serious, but most were just standard identifiers. Everyone knew Blake's. Hawk. Sarah stepped forward, her posture perfectly straight, her calm aura radiating quiet confidence. She took a slow breath and said in a voice that cut through the murmurs, "Viper One." The camp froze. Even the instructors blinked. Blake's eyes widened. His jaw tightened. He didn't recognize the weight in that name, not yet. A few whispers started among the trainees. "Viper One? Isn't that the—" Blake's mind raced. That call sign belonged to someone legendary, someone whose missions were classified, whose feats had saved countless lives, and whose reputation was whispered in military circles but never discussed openly. This wasn't just a talented officer. This was a living legend. Captain Reeves's expression shifted subtly, a mix of respect and caution. "Yes," he said softly, almost to himself. "Viper 1, I should have known." Blake's mind couldn't process it fast enough. All the jokes, all the mockery from the first day, all the assumptions he had made about this quiet, unassuming woman, they had been completely wrong. He had belittled her in front of everyone, thinking she was just another trainee trying to prove herself. But she was something else entirely. Sarah's calm, steady gaze met Blake's. She didn't gloat. She didn't mock. She just stood there, letting the weight of her name and her reputation speak for itself. Her presence was enough. The kind of authority that comes not from words, but from accomplishments, from history, from hard-earned respect. Blake swallowed hard. You're Viper 1? He asked quietly, barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded. "Yes, and now you know why respect isn't given, Chief, it's earned." The other trainees were in shock. Some tried to whisper questions, but the moment held too much gravity. Even the instructors, who had seen dozens of trainees rise and fall, looked at her differently. This was more than skill. It was legacy. The simulated mission began, but the dynamic had completely changed. Blake and the others now followed her lead, aware of her unmatched instincts, her strategic mind, and her calm authority. She guided them flawlessly through every obstacle, every ambush simulation, every high-stress challenge. Every movement was deliberate, every command precise. For Blake, it was humbling. He realized that all his experience, all his confidence, meant little compared to the quiet, unshakable expertise of the woman in front of him. He had spent years thinking he was untouchable. Today, he learned a lesson that would stay with him forever. Never underestimate someone who carries history, skill, and honor behind their silence. By the end of the exercise, every trainee had gained a new perspective. They no longer saw Sarah Donovan as just another officer. They saw Viper 1, a force of nature, a master of her craft, someone whose mere presence commanded respect. Blake approached her after the exercise, voice low and sincere. "Ma'am, it's an honor. I should have recognized sooner." Sarah nodded, her expression calm but carrying a faint, knowing smile. "It's never too late to learn respect, Chief," she replied simply. As the sun set over the training base, the wind carried the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs. The legend of Viper 1 had been revealed, and there was no turning back. Everyone at the base, from the rookies to the seasoned SEALs, now understood the truth. Strength, skill, and respect are earned, not assumed. And for Blake Harris, the lesson was personal. He had mocked her, belittled her, and underestimated her. But now he knew that the quiet woman standing before him wasn't just part of the team. She was legendary, and no one at the base would ever forget her name. The reveal of Viper 1 wasn't just a moment of recognition. It was a turning point, a lesson etched into the minds of everyone present. True greatness isn't loud. It's calm, precise, and undeniable. And in the quiet aftermath, as the trainees filed back to their bunks, the name Viper 1 echoed silently in every mind, a reminder that legends walk among us, often unnoticed, until the moment they decide to step forward. The morning light spilled over the training ground, casting long shadows across the gravel and mud. The air was thick with anticipation. Yesterday had changed everything. Everyone knew now who Sarah Donovan was, the legendary Viper 1. But knowledge alone wasn't enough. Today, respect had to be earned, shown in action, felt in the moment. Blake Harris was the first to arrive at the course. He walked with a quiet tension he hadn't felt in years. Pride and frustration battled inside him. For the first time in his career, he had been humbled, and not by failure, but by someone else's quiet, unstoppable competence. He watched Sarah from across the yard. She was already stretching, moving with the same calm precision that had become her signature. No one spoke to her, but everyone watched. The day's exercise was a team-focused mission simulation, the final test of the week. It was designed to push coordination, leadership, and endurance to the absolute limit. Captain Reeves stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Today you operate as one team. Success requires trust, communication, and respect for each member's ability. Failure is a lesson, but today leadership will be clear." He looked directly at Sarah. "Lieutenant Donovan, "Lead your squad." The crowd of trainees shifted, some glancing at Blake, who opened his mouth to protest, then thought better of it. He had seen her skills, her instincts, her calm decisiveness. It wasn't about rank. It was about ability. And today she had earned the right to lead. The whistle blew. The squad moved forward into the simulated urban combat zone, navigating smoke, obstacles, and sudden enemy engagements. Blake took position beside Sarah, not behind, not ahead, beside. He watched how she moved, how her eyes scanned the terrain, how her commands were sharp but quiet, precise but unassuming. 2 o'clock. "Low cover," Sarah whispered. Her voice carried authority without arrogance. Blake obeyed instantly, ducking behind a crumbling wall. "Check your flanks," she added. "Pierce, cover the rear." The team moved seamlessly, instinctively following her lead. Every action she called out, every strategy she implemented was perfectly timed. Blake realized that he had never truly witnessed leadership like this. Leadership that demanded nothing but earned everything. Midway through the course, a mock casualty appeared, a dummy rigged to simulate a wounded teammate. Panic, hesitation, and chaos could have broken the team, but Sarah took control. "Secure the area," she commanded. "Lee, cover the left. Harris, drag him to safety, like slow and steady." Blake froze for a split second, then followed. He had been used to leading, giving orders, making split-second calls, but now he moved with her rhythm, trusting her judgment completely. Every move she made was instinctive, flawless, and confident. By the time the squad reached the extraction point, they were exhausted. Mud-soaked, sweat-streaked, hearts racing. But every trainee had made it through without error. Sarah looked over her team calmly, scanning their faces. Blake stepped forward, uncharacteristically quiet. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, genuine, filled with respect. It's an honor to serve under your lead. I should have recognized sooner." "You earned it." Sarah didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply nodded. "Respect isn't given, Chief, it's proven," she said. Her tone was soft, but every word carried weight. Around them, the team started to understand. The whispers grew into nods, glances became acknowledgments. Pierce, who had doubted her silently at first, now approached. "Lieutenant, I get it now," he said quietly. "You're incredible." Sarah's expression softened just slightly, and for the first time she allowed a faint smile. "We all have our strengths," she replied. "Today we proved that together." Blake watched her, a mix of humility and awe washing over him. Every ounce of pride he had carried melted into respect. For years he had thought strength meant loudness, dominance, showing off. Now he understood. Strength meant calm, precision, knowledge, and above all, earning the trust of those around you. The commanding officer, Captain Reeves, stepped forward. "This is what leadership looks like," he said, voice carrying across the field. "Not ego, not arrogance. True leadership comes from skill, courage, and the ability to inspire respect. Lieutenant Donovan, today you have shown all of that and more." The trainees erupted into quiet applause. Not the loud, rowdy kind, but the kind that comes from genuine admiration. Sarah Donovan didn't bask in the attention. She stood tall, composed, letting the respect settle around her naturally. Blake extended his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady now, "for showing me what real leadership looks like." She shook it firmly, a connection forged not from hierarchy but from earned recognition. "It's never too late to learn," she said softly. The legend of Viper One had grown that day, not just through skill but through the respect she had earned. The SEALs, the trainees, even Blake Harris, now understood that true power was quiet, precise, and undeniable. And as the sun set over the training base, casting long shadows across the mud and gravel, one truth became clear to everyone present. Sarah Donovan wasn't just a remarkable officer. She was a force of nature, a leader whose presence demanded respect, and a legend who would be remembered long after the day ended. The team had learned their lesson. Blake had learned his respect had finally been earned.